There is a specific kind of confusion that comes from wanting something and watching yourself behave as if you don't. You meet someone who is actually good, who is kind, consistent, available in the ways you always said you wanted. And something in you, something you did not choose and cannot fully explain, starts to pull back. You find reasons. You go a little quiet. You notice a flaw that didn't bother you last week. And somewhere underneath all of it is a question you don't quite let yourself ask out loud. Why am I doing this? This video is going to give you a precise answer to that question. Not a moral answer. Not a "here is what you're doing wrong" answer. A biological one. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a verdict and an explanation. There are 7 specific signs that a nervous system has learned to treat intimacy as a threat. And if several of them sound familiar, what that means is not what you've probably been telling yourself it means. Before the 7 signs, one thing needs to be said clearly, because without it, the list is just another list. Your nervous system is not your personality, it is not your character, it is a threat detection system. And its entire job, the only job it has ever had, is to scan for danger and respond before your conscious mind has had a chance to weigh in. It does this faster than thought, faster than intention, faster than the part of you that knows intellectually that this person in front of you is not a threat. Now here is the part that changes everything. That threat detection system is not factory set. It learns. It takes in information from early experience, from what happened when you got close to people, from what closeness cost you, from whether the people who were supposed to be safe actually were, and it builds a model. And then it applies that model going forward, automatically, without asking you. So when your nervous system has learned through real experience, not imagination, that love comes with withdrawal, or unpredictability, or the specific pain of being too much or not enough, it does something completely logical. It starts to treat the approach of love as a signal to prepare, not to receive, to prepare. That is not a character flaw. That is a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do. Here is what that looks like from the inside. Sign 1. You feel the most anxious when things are going well, not when there's conflict, not when something is wrong, when everything is fine. When the person is consistent, warm, showing up the way you hoped. And instead of relaxing into it, something in you tightens. This is one of the least talked about signs, because it looks from the outside like ingratitude, and from the inside, it feels like self-sabotage. But here is what's actually happening. Your nervous system learned that good periods are the ones to watch. Because in its history, calm was often the thing that came right before rupture. Warmth was sometimes the setup. So now, when things feel good, the threat detection system doesn't stand down, it escalates. It is not afraid of the bad. It is afraid of how much the good is going to hurt when it ends. Sign 2. You find yourself mentally preparing for them to leave before there's any evidence they're going anywhere. You rehearse the ending. You imagine the version of events where they pull back, where they get bored, where you find out you were wrong about them, not because you want that. Because your nervous system is trying to get there first. If you've already imagined the loss, the actual loss hurts less. That is the logic. It is old logic. But it is not irrational. It is what you learned when being caught off guard was the thing that cost the most. Sign 3. Physical closeness, or emotional closeness going deeper, produces a feeling that is hard to name. Not quite discomfort. Not quite fear. Something closer to the urge to surface. Like the intimacy itself is the pressure, and some part of you needs air. This one gets misread by the person experiencing it and by the people around them as not wanting closeness, as being cold, as being avoidant. But that framing misses what's actually happening. The nervous system that responds this way usually wants closeness more than most. The response is not rejection of the other person. It is a regulation response, the system doing what it learned to do when the proximity of another person activated something it didn't know how to manage. Sign 4. You are significantly better at caring for someone than you are at letting someone care for you. You know how to show up. You know how to ask the right questions, hold space, offer what's needed. And when the attention turns to you, when someone asks how you actually are, when someone wants to take care of something for you, there's a very specific kind of discomfort. A deflection. A joke. A redirect. Here is why. Receiving care requires something the giving of care does not. It requires you to be seen as someone who needs something. And for a nervous system that learned early that needing things was complicated, that the need might not be met, or might cost something, or might make you a burden, receiving becomes the harder direction. Giving keeps you in control. Receiving asks you to trust. And trust is the thing your nervous system has been quietly, methodically guarding against. Sign 5. You have a very high threshold for what you'll admit to wanting, not in general, specifically in relationships. You want consistency, but you won't say so until it's missing. You want more, but you describe what you have as fine. You minimize the want before it becomes visible, because visible wanting feels like exposure. And exposure, for a nervous system that has learned to associate need with disappointment, feels like the moment before the hurt. So the system does something elegant and devastating at the same time. It reduces the stated want to the level it believes can be safely met. You get less than you need, and part of you arranged it that way. Not because you don't know what you want, because some part of you decided it was safer not to ask for it. Sign 6. You are much more comfortable in the almost than in the actual. The almost relationship. The thing that has intensity but no definition. The connection that is real but somehow never quite lands. This one is hard to name because it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like circumstance, like timing, like almost but not quite, just keeps being where you end up. But here is what's actually happening in the nervous system. The almost has all the emotional charge of closeness without the full vulnerability of it. You can feel the pull, feel the warmth, feel the potential, and the threat detection system stays just below its threshold. Not fully activated, not fully at rest. A manageable tension, the relationship that is defined, present, asking you to be fully in it, crosses a line the almost never reaches. And that line is where the system trips the alarm. So the shrine calmness becomes home, not because you chose it, because your nervous system learned it was the closest to love it could get without triggering everything it was built to protect you from. Sign 7. When someone stays, when they don't leave after seeing something real, when they remain consistent past the point you expected them to go, your first response is not relief. It's suspicion. Not conscious suspicion. Not a thought you choose. A felt sense that something isn't adding up. That if they've seen this much and are still here, either they haven't fully understood, or they want something, or the departure is just being delayed. The nervous system that learned love is dangerous did not learn this from nothing. It learned it from the specific experience of someone who stayed and then didn't. Someone who seemed safe and then wasn't. Someone whose consistency turned out to have conditions. And so now consistency itself has become a trigger. Not because you're broken, because your threat detection system is doing its job with the data it actually has. When you see all 7 of these together, not as a list of things wrong with you, but as a map of what one nervous system learned to do when love became something it needed to survive, rather than something it could simply receive, something shifts. The confusion doesn't disappear, but it stops feeling like evidence. You were not broken into these responses, you were shaped into them by real experience, by real loss, by the specific things that happened when you were too young to have any other option than to adapt. That is not a verdict about who you are. That is a record of what you went through. If this framework landed for you, if seeing the signs translated into something that felt like finally having the right map, there's a resource in the description that goes one level deeper. It's called the Nervous System Dating Guide, and it gives you 5 body-based tools designed specifically for the moments these signs show up in real time. Not for when you're calm and thinking clearly, for when your system has already activated and the intellectual knowledge isn't reaching it. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. So, you have the map now. You probably recognize yourself in at least a few of those signs, maybe more than a few. And if you've been sitting with this for a while, you might already be asking the version of the objection that usually comes next. Okay, but knowing this hasn't actually changed anything. I've understood the nervous system piece before, and I still freeze. I still pull back. I still find myself in the almost. That is a fair and important thing to say. And this is where the distinction actually matters. Knowing the label, anxious attachment, nervous system response, threat detection, is not the same as understanding the specific moment-by-moment sequence, because the sequence is where the intervention lives. Here is what the sequence actually looks like. Something happens. A text that takes longer to arrive than expected. A moment of distance you can feel but can't name. A warmth that arrives and somehow activates the pull to surface. Before you have processed any of it consciously, your nervous system has already run its pattern match. Already compared this moment to the archived version of the last time something felt like this. Already initiated the response. By the time you're aware of what's happening, you're already mid-response. What changes with this framework is not the speed of the response. The nervous system is faster than you. It will always get there first. What changes is what happens in the half second after you notice. Because when the framework is in place, when you know that what just activated in you is a threat detection system running a very old program, you have something you didn't have before. You have a different question to ask yourself in that moment. Not, what is wrong with me? Not, why am I doing this again? But, what did my nervous system just decide was happening? And is that actually what's happening? That question is not a cure. It is not going to stop the activation. But it opens a gap, a small one, sometimes very small, between the response and the action. And that gap is where everything eventually changes. You probably already know the logical version of what to do when the pattern activates. What this video is doing and what the work ahead is doing is something different. It's building the capacity to reach that knowledge in the moment your nervous system has decided you're in danger. That is not a mindset shift. It is a body-level change. It happens slowly, through repetition, through the accumulation of moments where the feared thing didn't happen, where someone stayed, where you asked for something and the world didn't end, where closeness turned out to be survivable. That accumulation is what teaches the nervous system something different than what it learned. Not argument, not insight, experience. And it starts. It can only start from understanding what is actually happening, which is what these 7 signs were for. If you want the tools for what to do in the moment, the pattern activates the body-based practices that can reach the part of you that the intellectual understanding can't. That's what the Nervous System Dating Guide is built for. Link in the description and the pinned comment. Which of the 7 signs hit closest to home for you? And did having the nervous system explanation for it change anything about how you see it? There is something worth naming before this ends. The question underneath a video like this, the one that doesn't always make it into the search bar but is there anyway, is something like, does this mean I'm always going to be like this? Here is the answer this video was built to give. The behaviors that confuse you, the pulling back, the bracing for loss, the preference for the almost, the suspicion when someone stays, are not personality. They are a learned response from a nervous system that had very good reasons to learn them. A nervous system that looked at its early experience of love and drew a completely logical conclusion, that closeness is where the danger lives, that the approach of intimacy is a signal to prepare, that wanting too visibly is the thing that costs. That conclusion made sense, given what it had to work with, given the age at which it was drawn, given the options that were available, but it was drawn from a sample that is now incomplete. Because you are here, and the data has changed, and a nervous system, unlike a verdict, can update when it encounters enough evidence that the old model no longer fits. What you walked into this video carrying was the weight of behavior you couldn't explain and had been treating as confession, as proof of something about who you fundamentally are. What the evidence actually shows is that you have a nervous system that learned exactly what it was taught. Those are 2 completely different things. One is a verdict. One is a history. And a history, unlike a verdict, can change. Not because you decide it, not because you finally understand enough, but because the nervous system that learned one thing is the same nervous system that can, slowly, through different experience, learn something else. That is not a promise about timeline. It is a statement about mechanism, and the mechanism applies to you because it applies to everyone who has ever been here, which, it turns out, is more people than the silence around this has ever made it seem.